gums at each other any chance they get. The fight clock is brought to you by Modelo.
It's time
for you to sit back, relax, and listen to a complete and fucking utter armchair expert give his completely and utterly useless opinions on the one hell of an amazing sport that is MMA. G'day, guys. We are finally, or already, depending on how you look at it, into the UFC 300s. We have just gone UFC 300, and to be honest, given the fact that UFC 301 is kind of going to be a bit of an card, if we're being honest, I'm probably going to do the recap for UFC 300 and talk about UFC 301 in the same segment, just to make it easier. But, ladies and gentlemen, what a card UFC 300 was. There's a lot of fights I could talk about, but where else would there be to start? But I'll set the scene. Me and my mates sitting at the pub in Sunbury, as I described, watching Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway for the BMF title. It's gone on. It's gone the distance pretty much. Max has won pretty comfortably. For the first time ever, Justin Gaethje has been pretty much dominated, which is a story in itself, really. Which, you know, that in itself is just crazy. And with 1 second to go of the 5th round, Max knocks out Justin and becomes the baddest motherfucker in the UFC. Needless to say, me and my mates all jumped out of our chair in unison and screamed, "What the fuck?" I read a post after the fight that said, "Let Max keep the title forever." You know, it said Max Holloway just won the BMF title in the most BMF way possible. Let him keep that belt forever. He will never top that. Very true, man. Very true. Unless something else tops it, bro, it's fight of the year for me. Like, honestly, it's certainly in my top 10 knockouts or fights. Absolutely. Who knows? Maybe I'll make a list of those one day on this podcast. But, of course, the card goes on. Wei Li defends her belt against a fellow Chinese woman. But then we get to the fight Drake bet on. Alex Periera versus Jamahl Hill for the light heavyweight championship. And he KO'd him in the first round and won Drake his money. Alex KO'd Jamahl, in the first round and won Drake his money back and styled on Jamahl for disrespecting him at the end. The chammer, as they say. And defended his belt and just rounded out UFC 300. I saw in a caption, you know, these are the nights we live for. It was a celebration of the greatest sport in the world, and I couldn't agree more, man. It may not have been as star-studded as we would have liked, but it absolutely delivered in other ways. What a card UFC 300 was. Absolutely, man. But we get to UFC 301 now. Like I said, we are in the 300s. It's so crazy, man. So mental to me that we've come this far and in a seemingly such a short time for me. 4 years, as I said. But look, guys, I'll be honest. The only reason that I'm watching this fight is to see Jose Aldo come back in front of his own people in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Rooting for him in that fight against... who is he fighting? God, that's how much I sound bad, don't I, right now? That's how much I don't know. UFC 301. He's fighting Jonathan Martinez in the co-main event. And then, of course, in the main event, I'll also watch Alexandre Pantoja defend his flyweight title against 12-1 Aussie man from land down under, Steve Ercerg, I think is how you pronounce his name. Would have been good if that fight could have been on 305 in Perth, which is, I believe, where he's from. But, oh, well, man, look, I'll be honest, bit of a lackluster card, and they're the only two reasons I'll be watching. But I suppose you got to put up with that, you know, when you've had a whole run of good cards like we've had lately. But anyway, guys, going to take a break, as always. And to be honest, I'm not really that comfortable right now for reasons I won't go into here. But when we come back, we, of course, had some announcements after UFC 300, which I'll get to. All that and more when I come back. So, at the press conference after UFC 300, we got a couple of announcements from the boss, Dana White. One is that in June, I believe, let me look it up what date it is. UFC 302 is going to be on the 2nd of June. Well, the 2nd of June to us. It'll be the 1st of June to you guys. UFC 302 from Newark, New Jersey is going to feature Dustin the Diamond Poirier taking on Islam Makhachev for the lightweight 155 pound division title. So Dustin is getting his probably final shot ever at the belt on that card. Geez, I kind of hope he wins. If he wins, it'll be up there with Bisping at UFC 199 as far as biggest upsets and journeyman, I guess, for lack of a better term, title wins. It'll be so wholesome, man. Great way for Dustin to end his career. You all know I'm a big fan of him. Seems like genuinely one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, really, in this business. And yeah, man, I kind of hope he wins. Honestly, I really do. It'd be a nice thing to see. But not only that, Sean Stickland takes on Paulo Costa in the co-main event of UFC 302, which, as I think I tweeted about on the night of the announcement and probably put on Instagram as well, put on our socials, as I'd say, probably all but confirms we're getting Izzy versus DDP at UFC 305 in Australia, like the rumors have been suggesting, which I don't mind at all. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, that fight needs to happen and their grudge needs to be settled. Do feel a bit bad for Stickland. I was hoping he'd get his rematch and not have to fight for it when he'd had such a close fight, but oh well, it is what it is. I'm not the matchmaker, but he ended it. Dana ended his announcement with the biggest bombshell. UFC 303, June 29th, I believe, or June 30th. June 30th to us in Australia, but June 29th, 2024, UFC 303, International Fight Week. It's finally happening, ladies and gentlemen. Mystic Mac is back, and I'll finally get to cover a fight of his on this podcast. We've been talking about it for how long, and now it's finally happening, ladies and gentlemen. Gee whiz. The tough fight, McGregor Chandler, 5 rounds, 170 pounds. Get ready, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. just announcing it now here is making me feel weird, honestly. Look, I'm in mixed feelings about this. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad it's happening, even though I do sort of feel like Conor will lose. If he wins, it's going to be the greatest sporting comeback ever, probably, if he wins. But it's weird, you know. Once upon a time, the UFC would have not only bent over backwards to make a Conor McGregor, and look, I've obviously talked about a lot in the lead up to this about how Conor said that he wasn't happy more or less with how the company has been run, or hinted at it when he said Lorenzo would have had a deal on the table for him by now, blah, blah, blah. This kind of just cemented it to me that their relationship isn't great. Once upon a time, they would have bent over backwards to not only get a Conor McGregor fight booked, but they would have announced it in a huge way. That they probably would have had them come out and face off against each other on the card, or at least announced it like they did Brock Lesnar when he came back at UFC 200. But instead, Dana just announced it to a bunch of reporters at a press conference, which sort of says to me that they do not have a great relationship for whatever reason. Like I said, I suspect it's got a bit to do with business. Probably them just cooling down on Conor, but and, you know, devaluing him a bit because he probably he has expressed the desire to go and fight elsewhere, you know, get more boxing money, I guess, and do other things before his career's over, get another big boxing payday, as I said, and then maybe right off into the sunset, who knows. But, you know, the UFC probably doesn't want to not be a part of that, so they want to devalue Conor as much as possible, or, you know, just ride it out until he's too old, more or less, which, like I've said before, given all of what he's done for the UFC, is a shame. But well, man, it's just, you know, like I said, the least they could do is let him fight out his contract and go get a big payday, but I suppose I don't want to not be a part of that. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens after this fight, I guess, but it just was very different to how Conor McGregor fights normally get announced. But nonetheless, I'm extremely gassed for the fact that the fight is finally happening, and I'll finally get to cover a McGregor fight on this podcast, as I've wanted to do for about 2 years. But sorry, guys, some stuff's going on outside my room, and I've just been a bit distracted. Doors are closing and stuff. But speaking of Conor, he actually just got announced as a part owner of the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, which is interesting. He's now invested in a fight league, I guess you could call it. Yeah, definitely very interesting, and he's still making investments with his money and making sure he earns more, I guess. But yeah, anyway, that wraps up the announcements after UFC 300. Just when I thought I could relax, just when I thought I could settle down for a bit, maybe going to events, the UFC keeps the bangers coming. Greatest sport in the world, man, bar none. But anyway, when I come back, I want to talk a little bit of boxing and a few other things before we round this podcast off. All that and more when I come back. So I said I wanted to talk a bit of boxing, and I do. First off, Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia. Wow, that did not turn out how I expected it to. Ryan dominated Devin, basically, and beat him. And, I don't think anyone thought that would happen given the antics Ryan's been perpetrating lately. Did he have us all fooled? Who knows? That was a question people were asking until today when he popped for, I think, 2 banned substances. And, doesn't exactly look good if it is indeed true, because it's been called fake news by a lot of people. Wow, it's crazy. Although, yeah, Devin's still definitely got his ass whooped. There's no changing that, despite what people want to say. But wow, when I saw it, my immediate thought was, I watched Haney versus Kambosos, both fights, and I was like, man, I wonder how George Kambosos is feeling right now, knowing that Devin Haney is beatable, basically. It's like, when Kambosos couldn't do it, twice on his home turf, no less. It's like, wow, it was crazy. But speaking of things being crazy, it has just been announced that I've mentioned Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson a few times. It's just been announced that what I said in the last podcast about it being an exhibition was farcical. It has indeed been sanctioned, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to go on both their pro records. Wow. 8 3-minute rounds. Gee whiz. Mike Tyson is actually going to be in a pro fight in his 50s, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. But let's end off the boxing talk by mentioning the sad fact that, as I found out by watching, as I've mentioned, True Geordie the other day, Francis Ngannou's son passed away. Wow. After all that man's been through in life, for it to throw him a curveball like that, like Geordie said, life could just be fucking cruel sometimes, and Geordie shed a tear in that, and in that tribute, he did a little tribute to him at the end of one of his videos, and wow, man. As you guys know, I'm Team Francis, and yeah, his son wasn't old either. I think he was less than a year old. Wow, just become a father, and now he has to go through that. Like forget him versus Wilder, forget him in MMA at this point. Like, who even knows if he fights again? Like, he'd be considering everything right now, and I can't blame him. Yeah, as you guys know, I'm Team Francis all the way, and yeah, my condolences to him, man. Far out. That was just tragic. But let's end this podcast off on a slightly lighter note, with the fact that I got an email today, I think, with the news that Google Podcasts is being shut down. End of an era for me. I've been listening to Google Podcasts for a few years now. Definitely an end of an era for me, so I'm just going to have to stick to Spotify with everything. Good news is we're on YouTube, so anyone who is using Google products, just switch on over there. Go subscribe to us on YouTube, and we're still on there. All our episodes get uploaded over there, so you can listen to us over there. I probably did see it coming to some degree. Google has done this with a lot of their products. They had a music streaming platform a few years ago that I used to use, and they got rid of that in favor of YouTube Music. But yeah, definitely sad for me. And yeah, just want to let you guys know that. So you don't think we've just disappeared from there. I'll definitely have to remove that link from our link tree. Yeah, end of an era. But anyway, guys, that was the UFC 300 recap, UFC 301, 302, 303, and all the other topics that I talked about. Can't wait for UFC 302 or 303, and I can't wait for Jose Aldo's return. But as always, guys, till the next one, catches.